Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Talent and Strategy Show here on the Success is a Choice podcast network. I am your host, Jamy Bechler. And today's episode is made possible by our friends over at Affinity Recruiting and Consulting. You can find out all about their work at affinitytoday.com. Affinitytoday.com. Learn how to advance your mission and increase your bottom line. Affinitytoday.com. Our thought for the day as we get going with this show: leadership develops daily, not in a day. You're just not going to be an overnight sensation. You're not going to develop fully your leadership potential in just one day. As we're going to talk about today with our guests, you're not going to develop a great business, a hugely successful business just in a day, because your leadership's not going to develop in a day. It's going to develop daily. So I'm going to bring in our guest today, co-host. You know him, Ruston Pierce. Ruston, welcome back to the show.
Good morning.
Yeah, Ruston is a longtime school administrator, worked in development a lot, was a coach, athletic coach, and now he's president of consulting for Affinity Recruiting and Consulting. And our very, very special guest, Ruston is just our special guest, our special co-host, but our very, very special guest today is Alan Lowe. Alan Lowe is a big-time executive coach, works with high-level CEOs all over the place in all different industries. He's also the founder, president, grand poobah of the Angel Advisors. So, Alan, welcome to the show, and we love just jump in. Give us a 30,000-foot view of kind of your background and what you do, working with all of these executives and helping businesses be better.
Okay. I work with mainly small to medium-sized entrepreneurial companies. That's where my focus has always been. Those are special people from my point of view. The people that take the risk to go out and start their own thing and bet the farm on it, to try to make it work. Though I have a heart for those people. I ran two companies in Atlanta is part of my past history of my career, but for the last 20 years, probably I've spent working and coaching and helping these companies grow. And as both of you know, it's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about the people. And growing the people to the point that you can actually step back and be the CEO and let your leadership team do the things that you're paying them to do.
So I've been very fortunate to know Alan for several years, and actually had Alan work with some of my teams. And Alan is one of those unique individuals who can read a room, understand the dynamics in the room, and ask the right questions at the right time. So I get the privilege today of kind of being the host or being the lead and facilitating this conversation, because Alan is very much a leadership development guy. He's very good at it, very good at executive coaching. But also Jamy is very much involved in leadership development, works with groups all over the country. So I get the opportunity to ask all the questions and just let you all talk today. So my first question is just about organizational health. And I'm curious from both your perspective, and Alan, you can go first and Jamy can jump in. Why is leadership development necessary for the overall health of an organization?
Well, I sort of led with that. It's like, at the end of the day, it's all about the people. Everybody thinks their business is different, but really at the end of the day, it's about the people you have. And if my people are better than your people, I'm going to win most days. And so, it's talent acquisition, development, and leadership. Those three big buckets. That's how you build a winning team. You're an athletic coach. Same concept that you would use on the athletic field is let's get the right players, get them in the right place, and teach them what they need to do, and then get out of their way and let them perform.
I'm a way better coach when I have good players.
Okay, yeah, sure you are. and the CEOs are way better CEOs when they have the right leadership.
Yep. Jamy, what about you? Why is leadership development necessary for overall organizational health?
Yeah, Alan's absolutely right about the people part of it. You win with people, flat out. You win with people, and Jim Collins in the book Good to Great talks about getting the right people on the bus, getting the right people in those right seats on the bus. But when I look at leadership, I kind of, this is kind of black and white, or it's simplistic. But I look at there's two types of leaders. There's the positional leaders. And then there's the people that are leaders because of their influence. And you could certainly be a positional leader that has influence. So it's not mutually exclusive. But, John Maxwell talks about positional leadership being the base, out of the 5 levels of leadership. The lowest level is positional leadership, and people follow you because they have to. Well, the better companies, and I think Alan's probably seen this with all the companies he's worked with, most of the time, there's always exceptions to every rule, but most of the time, the best companies are the ones that have positional leaders who also carry positive influence. People want to follow them, not just because they're the boss, not just because they have to, but because they feel like, hey, this person can get me where I need to go. Hey, this person can help us achieve results. This person can help us achieve goals. Hey, I respect this person, whatever it is. But even if you're not in a role of positional leadership, every single person, from a secretary to administrative assistants to just all regular team members, they all can be leaders. And so I think developing their leadership abilities, also known as developing their influential abilities, how they can influence each other to do the jobs better, I think is so crucial. And oftentimes we just think of leadership as, let's just develop the CEO, and we forget everybody else who, like Alan said, makes the success possible. You win with people, but then we don't invest in those people and build up their leadership skills for when the boss isn't around, but you got 3 or 4 people out to eat, or 3 or 4 people around the water cooler. Who's leading them? How are they leading each other? How are they influencing one another? And so developing those people in your program or your organization to be good leaders, I think sometimes gets forgotten about.
Alan, piggybacking off what Jamy just said, what are some examples of organizations you've seen who do that very well? Who, when you walk in, you see a common theme, you see a common culture, they clearly pour into their people. What are some concrete examples of organizations you've seen who do that well? And give us some practical examples of what stood out. Like, what was it that when you walked in, you were like, oh, this is different?
So one of my current clients is an engineering firm, and engineers are a different breed to lead and manage. But the 4 senior leaders who constitute the senior leadership team all have really good communication skills. And that's the first thing that stands out when you meet them. They're not the same people. When I'm sort of aggressive and assertive, and the other one's laid back, and that doesn't matter. Just that's style. But they're very good communicators, and they create. I mean, we're talking about teams. They create trust in the organization, so people trust them when they say, this is what we're going to do, they're going to follow through and actually make that happen. And so that's probably the first thing that you notice. But the other things that come to mind is they don't rush people through the leadership process. They spend time with people to see if they really want to step up and play at the next level in the organization. And they have a process where they're walking the younger leaders from point A to, point F or whatever, if you will, on the chart to get them ready. Because these senior leaders, two of them are going to retire here pretty soon. And so they got it. Now we're into succession planning. Where is the successors going to come from for these two key leaders in a pretty good sized organization?
That's awesome. That's a great example. I was just actually talking to somebody yesterday. I saw it, or I'm in contact with a church that has succession planning in place for 6 of their senior leaders, and the successors are all already on staff. They are actively cultivating them into their new role, and they have set timelines for when that entire succession process would take place. I have seen that with one individual in an organization. I'd never seen it with 6.
Yeah.
So that really stood out. Jamy, what about you? What are some examples of organizations that really stand out, do leadership development well, and what is it that jumped out at you?
Yeah, I was just actually with a team this week up in Milwaukee, Marquette University women's basketball, and their coach. Like, you go to their practice, and I know a lot of people listening to this are business people, but there's also a lot of coaches that listen to this as well. And you go to a practice almost like you could walk into the doors or the lobby of a business, and you can almost tell right away they have something special. Like, it's an it factor. And I watched this team play on TV, but I've never actually been to one of their practices. And the gym was loud the whole time. The players are always encouraging one another. They are constantly high-fiving each other. The pace of practice is quick. Like, there's not much standing around. There's not much, downtime. Everything is done with a purpose. It's intentional. The coach is very engaged. The players are engaged. And that's kind of mentality doesn't just happen on accident. And a lot of times businesses and teams, or businesses, sports teams, departments, whatever it is, they kind of want to wish a culture. Like, I want this culture. I wish it would happen, but then they don't do some of the steps to make it happen. And the coach and I were talking afterwards. The head coach is Megan Duffy. She was a great player at Notre Dame, played in the WNBA, but that doesn't make her a great coach. What makes her a great coach is that she's decided, she's intentional about, hey, we're going to have a certain culture. And that culture doesn't start at the start of practice, and it doesn't end when practice ends. And that's when a lot of people think that's when I'm going to build something special. It happens in every single interaction she has during the day. So when she sees a kid in the hallway, the locker room, the office, her culture is being made there, and then it translates on the floor. And so the best leaders, I think, they take responsibility for everything that's being done in their program. And hey, if we're not getting the job done on the court, or the results aren't what we want, I'm responsible for figuring out a way to make it happen. And this coach, I can tell, hey, she wants things a certain way, but her players have taken ownership in that as well. And they're a reflection of her, as opposed to her just banging her head against the wall saying, why won't these players do this? Why won't they do this? Every single interaction she has with them, that's part of building their culture, which is part of building up each individual person. So she treats each individual person differently, according to their needs. But just taking responsibility and understanding that, hey, my culture is intentional. We're going to get essentially what I want it to be and what I'm going to work for it to be.
Yeah. So Jamy hit on it a little bit there. We do have people from a lot of different industries that watch this. And I believe a lot of the things that we've talked about to this point, strategic planning, fundraising, initial business principles of a startup, and now today, leadership development. I believe all these things are transferable across industry, because really what we're talking about is building culture and building talent development and building leadership skills. So Jamy hit on it just a little bit there, but I'm curious, Alan, because I like for this to be very practical. So if I'm a business owner watching right now, what are those practical steps I can take to start building a culture of leadership within my staff?
Well, I think you start with the leaders. And so, whether it's a startup or, a growing enterprise that's, adding people, you got to have the right leaders. It can't all be the CEO. That's not a good plan. And so I wrote a document I just was glancing at before we got online here a while back about how do you build a strong leadership team? Where do you start? So obviously the first thing is selection and assessment. I mean, you got to pick the right players. I mean, Jamy was talking about the athletic team. You don't have talent. You can be a great coach, but it's not going to really do you much. It's not going to get you anywhere. So Ruston and I work together. I'm a Berkman certified consultant, and that's a tool that I use that's very useful in helping select the right people. And I think it helped Ruston know who he had in the room and who he could go to for certain things because that was their strength or their interest.
It's funny you bring that up. I was actually just telling Jamy about that right before we got on here.
Yeah.
That I felt like the Berkman profile and what it did for our team was transformational.
So it's a great tool. And I mean, it's the one I prefer, but I mean, there's other tools out there, but use something to help you understand who these people are at a real, ground level. Secondly is communication. Jamy was sort of referring to that about creating the culture. It's certainly not just in the office. It's got to be in all every time you touch your leaders. I was in a company that had offices across 15 cities all across the country. Well, the guy that was running our office in San Francisco, we had to be super intentional about staying connected to that guy because otherwise he's on an island. We're in Atlanta. He's in California. We don't hardly ever see him. And if we don't make an effort to talk to him regularly, it's real easy for people like that to get disconnected from the mission of the organization. So I'm just going to run through these real quick for your purposes here. But, we talk about, I do strategic planning as part of my practice that I do for companies. I lead strategic planning sessions with teams. And that's a real good way to build teams because now you're talking about real stuff, not theoretical, not, what would they say, kumbaya. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how we're going to really make 2023 a great year. And if the CEO's smart, he's going to ask good questions and listen to the other people in the room because he already knows what he thinks. What he needs to know is what the leadership team thinks. And so I always coach them. I coach the CEOs to, if you're going to speak, you be last. Let everybody else in the room speak before you say anything, because otherwise they're going to say, wow, Jamy, that was a great idea. Let's do that, right? And then I believe it, but that's what they're going to say. And then the leader, the other thing I think that helps the leader and builds trust is give the team permission to hold them accountable for the things that they committed to do, in the plan or for the company. And, it can't be a one-way street. If Jamy and I are working together and I'm not holding up my end of the bargain, he ought to be able to have a conversation with me respectfully and say, hey, what's going on? What's getting in your way here? And the real good CEOs have enough humility to be able to do that, and they don't feel threatened, because you're challenging them around some topic. And then, Jamy already mentioned culture. I think that comes in little pieces. It's like, you remember the old Lowe book, The 1 Minute Manager? I mean, just little interactions that you do during the day can make a big difference in the culture.
Yeah.
Actually saying hello to somebody and asking about their family, or just touch them a little bit. Don't just walk past them and wave because you're busy and you're going to the next meeting. And so the culture thing, I think, is people. I mean, what you see nowadays is people that, well, let's go have an event. And I'm not against events. I like to go and socialize as well as the next person. But just having a couple of barbecues twice a year is not going to build your culture. That's not what it's going to do.
But you can pretend it did.
Well, you can check the box, right? I worked on culture, check.
Yeah.
Now you can move on to the next thing. But that's
Jamy,
not really building a culture.
Yeah. Jamy, what about you? Some practical steps. What are some things you can think of that Alan didn't mention?
Yeah, Alan has some great things, and I love the part there at the end about checking boxes. I mean, your culture, essentially, how you do anything is how you do everything. How you do everything is how you do anything. And yeah, I mean, I visited with a number of teams and athletic departments this past week up in Wisconsin, and I'm always asked, no matter where I go, people are always wanting to know what's some team building activities I can do, or what's some, fill in the blank type thing. Give me a hack. Give me this magic pill, a magic bean or whatever. And I'm like, exactly what Alan talked about. You saying hi to your players, you high-fiving or fist bumping your players. In some cases, that's going to go a lot farther to building your team and building your culture than any big, huge rafting, whitewater rafting or any kind of team building thing that you can do. It's not about the event. It's about your interactions. And do people, like Alan said, do they trust you? And we forget that all the time as people with positions of leadership. We think if we check off a box, like Alan said, if we check a box, then everything's good. I mean, I love getting money from people in August and September when schools are starting, because they're checking their boxes of they have to have in-service people, or, hey, we're going to start off the year well. But I tell them all, hey, it's really the success is in the follow-up. What are you going to do now? It's not just me coming in. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm going to cash your check, but I would actually rather that check be smaller and you bring me in some other time, or bring someone else in, or have a plan for how you're going to follow up. And so oftentimes when you're building a team, when you're building culture, when you're trying to develop the people around you, it's in that follow-up. It's in what are we going to do now after we've checked our box? Because, we know, Ruston, you were a coach. I was a coach. We don't just do a rebounding drill. You don't just do a throwing drill the first week of practice and then say, oh, we did it, but that's how we approach leadership. That's how we approach some of these soft skills sometimes. And these things are some of the most important. Alan mentioned, getting the talent acquisition or getting the right people. And then he also talked about how sometimes that person in a position of leadership doesn't trust the people around them. Well, if you've done a good job on that front end of getting the right people around you, of finding the right fits, well, why did you hire them? If they're the right fit, if they're the people you wanted around you, then you need to trust that they know what they're doing. And then therefore your efforts are in coaching them up, is making them better, not stifling them, not handcuffing them, not you be in charge and they just, are compliant followers. You don't want to just hire people so that they can be at your beck and call. You want to hire people so you can fill in gaps for each other. So you can do what I can't do, and I do what you can't do, and so on. And so I think sometimes we as leaders or in leadership positions forget that sometimes.
Sure. So let's talk more about leaders, specifically the executives. And again, we have a lot of industries represented in our following. So I think these are transferable skills that transcend industry.
Correct.
When you talk about executive coaching, Alan and Jamy both work with executives. When you talk about executive coaching, what are the big elements? What are the key points that you're trying to kind of identify could be problem issues when you start working with someone? So, for example, I'm a driver. Alan knows this about me. He's told me this to my face. I'm a driver. I want to get things done, and I can tend to bulldoze people to get there. So if you all were coming in and you were going to sit down with me and talk about executive coaching, what are the things that you're going to try to find out about me? What are the things that you're going to try to analyze before we really get into some deeper processes?
So I'll jump in. I mean, I use the workman with my coaching clients. That's the first thing I do because it gives me a 6-month ramp up on who the person is I'm dealing with. Because now I know what your tendencies are, like you mentioned, being a driver. I know who I'm dealing with. So the first piece is that I got to know how to talk to you. I've got to be flexible in my style so I can flex with the person and communicate with words that'll mean something to them. So that's where I start. But then we quickly get into the second thing I do is I get, like if I were coaching you, Ruston, I want to get your definition of success. What does success look like for you? I don't get to choose that. I don't get to decide what you should do. You get to decide. You tell me what a year from now or 3 years from now where you want to be. And if I can get you to really be honest about what you're trying to do, now we sort of got what they call it, a North Star, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we're aiming for, and we sort of know where we're going. And then the third piece is when you ask the question. Most of the time, when I'm coaching someone, it's something about us that is getting in the way of us accomplishing what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
It's like the old cartoon, right? I've identified the enemy, and it is I. And so the people who will come out from behind their facade and be super honest with you about whatever their fears are or their misgivings about the situation or where they don't feel maybe competent. There's a whole body of work out there about the unintended CEO. That's one of the reasons they think CEOs work so hard is because they figure if they keep running fast enough, the people that will follow won't figure out that they don't know what the heck they're doing. And so they just run, and they try to stay ahead of the pack.
Jamy, hold your response to that question for just a second, because I want to unpack a little deeper something Alan just said, because I think it's extremely valuable for everybody listening. All right, so Alan, I am that person. I'm a driver by nature. You're looking at me going, we need to get to the deeper root, and it's you. How are you going to draw that out of me? Because I'm probably going to be pretty defensive, and I'm not going to be willing to lower that facade and let you get into the deeper issues. So how do you do that?
Well, it takes, number one, it takes time. Everybody's different. I mean, that's what I learned from doing these Berkmans. We think we're similar, we're not, and, and everybody's got their own differences, and so it requires some time, and so it would be multiple meetings. But it goes back to what we were talking about building a leadership team. I've got to build trust with you so that you know I'm not there to hurt you. I'm there to help you. And you know, everything I do is confidential. If I was coaching you, nobody's ever going to know what we talked about. And I hear things in coaching settings that you just can't imagine. That and I'm honored when people trust me enough to tell me that they tell me the real stuff, not the pretend stuff that they're trying to show the rest of the world. So going back to you, if I was trying to coach you, you know, my whole process is built of questions. And so I'm just going to keep asking you questions, and the questions are going to get a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper. And the questions that really work, Ruston, when I ask you a question that you can't just snap off an answer for me
Sure.
off the top of your head. Then I know I've found something that really matters to you. If you have to stop and really think about the answer to the question that I gave you.
Sure.
And so it's a progressive thing of working with people, and for some people it goes really fast. You know, they get real comfortable, and then they'll tell you more than you probably wanted to know. But that's just their personality. Other people, they're sort of gonna keep you at a little bit of an arm's length distance until they're sure that when you say this is confidential, it's really confidential, particularly in organizations. Because if I'm coaching a key exec, their assumption many times is, well, I'm going to go back and tell Ruston everything we talked about, which is not true. I won't do that. I may suggest you need to go tell Ruston what you just told me.
Yep.
But I'm not going to do that because it's not my story to tell.
Awesome. Jamy, back to the original question to you now. So you've started working with someone, let's say it was a college athletic director or whoever. You're starting to do some coaching with that person. What does that process initially look like?
Well, first of all, I feel like you're asking this question because you're trying to get free coaching.
Alan already. So, all right, full disclosure. So the process that Alan just walked through, he literally did with me about 6 years ago. So where he's looking at me and asking those questions over and over and over until I would break down enough to tell him reality.
Yeah, Alan hit upon a lot of things. You've got to build that relationship up so there's trust. But I would say right from the onset, it's encouraging if we're doing a coaching session, because unless you're absolutely forced to do that coaching session, and that rarely happens, you know, there's not a lot of court appointed coaching sessions of executives or people in positions of leadership. So most of the time you're there voluntarily. Now your motives may be slightly different. You know, you might not have purely, unselfish motives about being in coaching, but you still want to either become better yourself or you want your people to become better, which means you understand that, hey, I've got to do something to make my people better. Now it might go back to you're pointing fingers at your people saying they're the problem, they're the problem, they're the problem. So Alan or Jamy, help me to crack the whip on them a little bit better. Help me to get them more motivated. But at the end of the day, you're still in that session because you voluntarily want to get some kind of result. And so I think that that's an encouraging part. Now, the question is then once you're there, all right, how big of a facade is there with you? And so that'll be more questions, more questions, more questions, as Alan said. You know, the tougher facade or exterior you have, the more questions. But I'm going to try to figure out what makes you tick after we've kind of developed this relationship. I'm going to find out what motivates you, what makes you tick. It's similar to when you're a basketball coach and you have players come in for like a year-end evaluation, or you're a CEO, you're an executive, you're an administrator, and you're having an evaluation meeting with one of your team members. If Ruston comes in, sits down, and all of a sudden I tell Ruston what he needs to work on, I tell Ruston, hey, this is the solution for you. Well, number one, you may disagree with me, but number two, even if you agree with me, you might fight me a little bit because it's not your idea, it's my idea. And so I go from when I'm giving you suggestions and when I go to telling you stuff, what I'm really trying to do is get you to buy in. I'm trying to get you to, I'm trying to persuade you to something. And that's not going to get you fully on board with something. It's got to be more your idea. So the more I can figure out what makes you tick, but then get you saying the things, get you discovering that solution, not necessarily on your own, but you think it's on your own. I kind of lead you to that direction. So maybe I ask you questions to get you to the point of saying, you know what, I needed help on this day or on this project. I couldn't do it all by myself. So I get you admitting to some vulnerabilities. And then once you do that, now we can take it baby steps, because maybe you're a driver, but maybe you're a driver because you just want to do it all by yourself.
Right.
You think that you can do it the best, better than anyone else. And that might be 100% true, but you might do it the best, but you can't do it all the time. And so maybe not 100%, but maybe it's going to be 85%, but you're not doing it. Someone else is doing your 85%. You're still doing 100%, but you're not just spread out so thin. So if I can start getting you being a little bit more vulnerable, then that's a commonality that we can start to build upon. So I ask a lot of questions, try to find some common ground there, try to find some pain points, and then we work from there. If I can get you being vulnerable, if I can get you admitting some of your weaknesses or areas that you can improve on just a little bit, now it's not me telling you that, now it's you telling me that, and now we can build upon that.
Awesome. Well, I'm geeking out on this. I love this stuff. So final question, because we do need to wrap up soon. So final question, and Jamy, I'll ask you first, and then Alan will come to you. In all of the leadership development process and all the executive coaching processes and everything that we've talked about, how important is goal setting?
Yeah, well, I mean, you need to know where you want to end up so you can develop a plan to get there. Now, obviously goals, there's multiple different kinds of goals. Some are just wishing type goals. Some are so astronomically large or in the future that you got to break that up a little bit. But I definitely believe, and I know vision casting is not the same as setting goals. I understand that, but you need to have a target. You need to know where you, like I said, where you want to end up, what you want to be about, what you're trying to achieve, what gets you up out of bed each morning, those kind of cliche type things. But I definitely think the goal setting thing is of the utmost importance, so that you have at least some kind of focus. Now, whether or not that's a longer term goal, I know, Ruston, you're involved a lot in strategic planning, where those are goals on steroids. Those are, you're coming up with big, longer term type things. No matter how big or small it is, you've got to have something that allows you to keep a focus so that you don't get distracted. Horses, when they're running a horse race, Kentucky Derby, they have those blinders on, so they're not looking to the right or the left. They're looking straight ahead where they need to go. And obstacles or distractions are what you see when you take your eyes off the goal.
Alan, what do you think? Where does goal setting fit into all this?
Well, as I said a minute ago, everybody's different, and some people just love goal setting. I mean, and they eat it, breathe it, live and die by it. That's who they are. And then there's other people who resist it because they feel like it boxes them in,
Yep.
in limits their ability to be creative, if you will, in the leadership process. So, it's not a one size fits all type situation. That's why I always start with, well, Ruston, what's your vision of success? Just tell me about it. What's that picture look like? Paint me a picture. If a year from now or 3 years from now you're doing great, what would that look like? Yeah. How many hours would you be working a week? What things would you be doing? I mean, is in as much detail as I can get you to describe. And once I've got that around, then we're going to start the march to get there. It could be 5 years from now. I mean, let's talk about a guy that's 60 and he said, I want to sell my company back when I'm 65. That's 5 years. There's a lot of work that he's got to do in that 5 years in order to be ready at age 65 to maximize the value that he's built in his business. But he's got to start now. He's got to start building the pieces into his business in order to get it ready. And so typically when I do executive coaching, at the end of every meeting, I ask for 3 action items. I don't call them goals. Give me 3 action items, 3 things, Ruston, you're going to do that's going to get you towards moving toward that goal that you just described for me. And then the next time we get together, we'll talk about it. Did you get them done? And if you didn't, do they still matter? Or do we need to cross them off the list and put something else on there? I'm okay. Your plan, not my plan. But I am going to remember, because I take pretty good notes, and I'll remember the conversation that we had. And my only is not the right word, but my goal there is to make sure that if you said, I want to go over here, and now you're doing action items that are going to take you over to the left, I'm going to call it and say, how's that helping you, Ruston, get to where you said you want to go? Because, Jamy pointed out, CEOs in particular are prime for distractions.
Yeah.
And so they get distracted by that next shiny object out there. And now all of a sudden that's number one, in the long-term plan has sort of faded into the background. And so keeping you on track, that's part of executive coaching. And it's just, the analogy is holding up a mirror. I hold up the mirror and say, Ruston, here's what I see. Is that what you want? And you get to decide. You're always in control. I mean, it's you're the one that's got to live with the results. I don't. I get to move on to the next person and talk to them. And in the meantime, you're there trying to lead your leadership team. So you get to decide. And most people respond well to that, because they have a sense they're in control. They're making the calls. I'm just trying to help them get down. And if I can point them to resources that will help them, I will certainly do that, or introduce them to people, or whatever help they would need to try to get to their goals.
Yeah.
But the main thing is to keep you on the path.
Awesome. Jamy, you want to close us out?
Yeah, we have our quote of the day, and it's from Bill Walsh, the legendary Hall of Fame football coach. The culture precedes positive results. Champions behave like champions before they're champions. They have a winning standard of performance before they are winners. So it kind of goes into the vision. It kind of goes into even goals. Where do you want to end up? Your culture precedes your results. So if you want a certain set of results or outcomes, or even be successful, as Alan mentioned, what's your definition of success? Well, that happens before you see those results. A lot of times, you see an apple tree. Some of us may have just went to a corn maze or went to some farm where you pick apples. Well, apples don't just automatically appear on a tree. You have to plant the seed, plant that tree. You have to water it, tend it, do all this stuff, and then you get apples. So you have all these things that lead up to the results of your culture. We talked a lot about this today and little things here and there, but Alan, any closing thoughts, parting thoughts about leadership development, about working inside of a company, about culture?
Yeah, the thought that I had when you were talking there, Jamie, is I was reminded about John Wooden, the great coach at UCLA, and he always started with his new teams teaching them how to put on their tennis shoes. Now, as athletic coaches, that's probably humorous to you. It's humorous to me, but
I would have loved to have watched him sit Bill Walton, all 7 foot of him down, and tell him how to put his shoes on.
It may be mythology or it may be true, but that's what the story is. But the point of the story is nothing's too small.
Mm-hmm.
It's the little things that add up to a great culture. It's the little things that either make you a winner, like you were talking about championship teams, or they don't happen. And then your leader, then your position as a leader starts to erode because they don't see you living what you in your company.
Yeah. I used to tell people all the time, you can't shortcut your way to a championship.
No.
Well, great thoughts, Ruston. Appreciate you taking the lead, co-hosting today. Alan, appreciate all the work that you do with companies and business people and leaders and people of influence. And thank you for joining us on the show today. And for everyone listening watching live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, all across the globe, all across the world, we thank you for tuning in. For those of you watching on the replays, we also appreciate that as well. For those of you listening to the audio version of this, thank you for listening to the Success is a Choice Podcast Network. Please, if you would, kindly smash that like button, that thumbs up button, a notification button, or leave us a little 5-star review. That's the best way to share this show around and let other people know about it. Thank you so much. And until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you?